am Amelia Hart, and I am 27 years old. This is the story of the night I stood in front of a room full of strangers, paint dripping down my face, humiliated beyond words, and how, by morning, everything in my life had changed. The fiancé laughed that night. The guests looked away, pretending not to notice, but nobody in that ballroom knew who was watching from the top of the staircase. By the end of the evening, the fiancée would lose everything she had built her life around, and I would gain more than I ever thought possible. If you enjoy stories where quiet, good people finally get the justice they deserve, stay with me until the end because the ending will surprise you. Amelia Hart had learned a long time ago that the world did not owe her anything. She woke every morning before sunrise, long before anyone else in Ashcombe Manor stirred, and moved through its wide halls quietly, like a shadow that kept the whole house breathing. Though tiredness sometimes made her look older, she was 27. She had a younger sister, Lily, just 13, and Amelia was the only parent Lily had ever really known. Their mother had died years before, and their father had vanished long before that. So Amelia worked. She scrubbed floors, pressed shirts worth more than her monthly wage, and served meals to people who barely glanced at her. She never complained. She simply kept going because Lily was counting on her, and because giving up had never truly been an option for someone like her. The manor belonged to Nathaniel Reed, a man whose name alone could open doors in any city on earth. He had built his fortune from nothing, and though the business world knew him as sharp, calculating, and unshakably composed, the people closest to him saw something different. He was fair. He noticed things other wealthy men never bothered to notice. He remembered the names of his staff, asked after their families, and treated the people who kept his household running with a quiet respect few in his position ever offered. Amelia had worked for him for nearly 3 years, and in that time she had come to admire him, not for his wealth, but for the way he treated people who had nothing to give him in return. Nathaniel was engaged to Vivian Ashford, a woman as beautiful as she was demanding. Vivian came from old money and older expectations, raised to believe that appearances were everything. She dressed with precision, spoke with practiced charm, and wore a smile that could make a room feel as though it belonged entirely to her. But behind closed doors, Vivian carried a constant, gnawing insecurity she rarely let anyone glimpse. She needed to be the center of every room, to be adored, admired, and above all needed. Lately something had begun to bother her in a way she couldn't quite name, something small but persistent, like a splinter she could not pull free. Began with small things. Nathaniel thanking Amelia for remembering exactly how he liked his tea. Nathaniel praising Amelia's work ethic during a dinner with business partners, remarking that he wished more of his employees carried the same quiet dedication. None of it meant anything beyond simple appreciation. But to Vivian, every kind word Nathaniel gave someone else felt like a word stolen from her. She began watching Amelia more closely, not out of curiosity, but out of a slow, simmering resentment she could not quite name, even to herself. The head housekeeper, a wise older woman named Margaret, who had served the Reed household for nearly 18 years, noticed the shift long before Amelia did. Margaret had watched many young women pass through that house, and had learned to read the quiet signs of trouble before they grew loud. One evening, after Vivian had snapped at Amelia over something as small as folded towels, Margaret pulled her aside and offered the same advice she gave every young member of staff who worked too hard and complained too little. "Keep your head down," Margaret said gently, her hands resting on Amelia's shoulders. "Some people need someone smaller than them to feel bigger. Don't give her a reason. Just keep doing what you do best." Amelia nodded because that was what she always did. She kept her head down. She worked harder. She told herself it was temporary, that Vivian's coldness was only stress from planning the wedding, from the pressure of stepping into a life she hadn't quite grown into yet. Amelia held on to that belief even as the comments sharpened, even as the tasks grew heavier, even as Vivian found new and creative ways to remind her exactly where she stood in that house. The engagement celebration was meant to be the event of the season. Nathaniel's business partners, childhood friends, distant relatives, and the city's elite were all invited to celebrate the coming marriage. Vivian had spent weeks obsessing over every detail, table settings, lighting, music, menus, determined to create an evening so flawless that no one would ever forget it. Among her ideas was a live art corner, where a hired painter would create abstract canvases throughout the night while guests sipped champagne nearby. It was meant to be elegant, modern, a talking point for the evening. The paint cans and brushes were arranged early that morning near the west side of the ballroom, close enough to the stage to catch the light beautifully once the party began. Amelia had been assigned to help set up that corner, carrying supplies back and forth under Vivian's watchful eye, who insisted on overseeing every last detail herself. She wanted the night to be perfect, and more than that, she wanted to be perfect in front of Nathaniel's world, a world she still sometimes felt like an outsider looking into. By evening, the manor had transformed into something out of a dream. Chandeliers glowed above marble floors, string quartets played softly in the background, and laughter drifted through the halls as guests in elegant dress mingled beneath golden light. Amelia moved through the crowd quietly, refilling glasses and clearing plates, invisible in the way good service always is. Nathaniel, dressed simply but sharply, spent the evening speaking with old friends and business associates, occasionally glancing toward the staff with a small nod of appreciation whenever their eyes met, a habit that had become second nature to him. Everything was going smoothly until a small mistake disrupted the rhythm of the night. A young server, nervous under the weight of so many important guests, spilled a tray of drinks near a table close to where Vivian stood with a group of Nathaniel's business partners. It wasn't Amelia's mistake. She wasn't even near that table when it happened. But Vivian, already tense from the pressure of the evening, turned sharply, her eyes scanning for someone to blame. They landed on Amelia, who happened to be walking past at that exact moment with a tray in her hands. "You," Vivian said, her voice suddenly loud enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "Do you have any idea how much this evening means to me? And you can't even manage the simplest things?" Amelia froze, confused, because she hadn't touched that table at all. She opened her mouth to explain, but Vivian wasn't interested in explanations. Weeks of pressure, jealousy buried beneath polite smiles, insecurity she had refused to face. All of it rose to the surface at once, and she needed somewhere to put it. Her eyes landed on the paint cans sitting just a few feet away, part of the very display she had arranged herself. Before anyone could stop her, before Amelia even understood what was happening, Vivian grabbed an open can of paint and hurled it directly at her. The thick, cold liquid splattered across Amelia's face and uniform, dripping down her collar, staining the fabric she had pressed so carefully hours earlier. The room fell silent for a moment, and then, worse than silence, a few uncomfortable laughs broke out from guests who didn't know how else to react to something so shocking. Amelia stood frozen, paint dripping from her chin, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She didn't cry. She didn't shout back. She simply stood there, absorbing the humiliation in front of dozens of strangers, her dignity the only thing she had left to hold on to. Vivian, breathing hard, seemed to realize a second too late what she had done. But the damage was already spreading through the room like ripples across still water. What no one in that ballroom knew was that Nathaniel had stepped away from his conversation only minutes earlier, walking toward the staircase overlooking the main floor to take a phone call. From that vantage point above the crowd, he had seen everything unfold in painful clarity. He saw Vivian's accusation. He saw the paint lifted and thrown. He saw Amelia standing there, humiliated, saying nothing in her own defense. And in that moment, something inside Nathaniel shifted permanently. He walked down the staircase slowly, each step deliberate, his expression unreadable. The crowd near the bottom noticed him first, and a hush spread through the room as people realized what was about to happen. Vivian turned, her face pale, realizing suddenly that her fiancé had seen everything. Nathaniel didn't raise his voice. He never did. He walked directly to Amelia first, close enough that only she and those nearby could hear him ask if she was all right. His tone soft, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the ice in his eyes when he turned to face Vivian. "Why did you do that?" he asked simply. Vivian's mouth opened and closed, searching for an explanation that would soften what everyone had just witnessed. She mentioned the spilled drinks, the stress of the evening, the pressure of hosting such an important night. But Nathaniel shook his head slowly, and when he spoke again, his voice carried through the silent ballroom. "This isn't about tonight," he said. "I've watched this happen for months. The way you speak to her. The way you speak to all of them, actually, whenever you think no one important is watching. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't." He paused, letting his words settle over the crowd, many of whom shifted uncomfortably, some suddenly remembering small moments they had witnessed themselves but chosen to ignore, the way people often do when speaking up feels inconvenient. "Character isn't shown in how you treat people who can help you," Nathaniel continued, his voice steady and calm, which somehow made it more devastating than if he had shouted. "It's shown in how you treat people who can't do anything for you in return. And tonight you showed me exactly who you are." Without another word, he reached for her hand, gently, almost tenderly, and removed the engagement ring from her finger. The gesture was quiet, but in that ballroom full of witnesses, it carried the weight of a verdict. Vivian stood there, stunned, the ring resting in Nathaniel's palm, her carefully built world collapsing in front of the very people she had spent years trying to impress. The days that followed were quiet in a different way. Word spread quickly through the circles Vivian had once ruled so effortlessly. Invitations that used to arrive without question suddenly stopped coming. Friends who once praised her at every gathering now found reasons to avoid her calls. Her own family, embarrassed by the public unraveling of her engagement, distanced themselves entirely, unwilling to be tied to a story that had already become the talk of the city. Vivian reached out to Nathaniel once, asking for a private conversation, hoping perhaps for one last chance to explain herself, to apologize, to somehow rebuild what she had shattered. Nathaniel agreed to see her, out of respect for the years they had shared, if nothing else. But when she began her apology, he stopped her gently, shaking his head with something that looked almost like sadness rather than anger. "I'm not upset because you embarrassed me," he told her quietly. "I'm upset because you showed me who you really are, and I almost married someone I didn't actually know. Respect isn't something you can apologize your way back into. Once it's gone, it's gone." Vivian left that conversation with nothing left to say, finally understanding that some doors, once closed, do not open again, no matter how hard you knock. Meanwhile, Amelia had returned to her quiet routine, though nothing about her world felt quite the same anymore. A few days after the party, Nathaniel asked to speak with her privately, something that had never happened before in her 3 years working in his home. Amelia walked into his study nervously, unsure what to expect, wondering if she was about to lose her position over the disruption the party had caused, even though none of it had been her fault. Instead, Nathaniel stood as she entered, a gesture of respect that caught her off guard immediately. He apologized to her directly and sincerely, telling her that what happened at the party should never have happened, and that he was sorry it had taken him so long to notice how she had been treated. He told her that her patience and grace under such humiliation had not gone unnoticed, and that people who carried themselves with dignity, even in their worst moments, deserved far more than quiet admiration from a distance. He offered her a new position within his company, better pay, better hours, and far more respect than the role she currently held. He also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he had already arranged for her younger sister Lily to be enrolled in one of the finest schools in the city, fully funded. A small gesture, he said, compared to what her strength deserved. Amelia sat there for a long moment, overwhelmed, tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from the shock of being seen after years of feeling invisible. She told him gently that she had never wanted revenge, never wanted anyone to lose everything because of her. She had only ever wanted a small amount of respect, the same respect anyone deserves, regardless of the uniform they wear or the job they do. It was that humility, that complete absence of bitterness even after everything she had endured, that made Nathaniel respect her even more than he already did. Margaret, watching quietly from the doorway as the conversation unfolded, allowed herself a small, proud smile, the kind that comes from watching patience finally rewarded after years of quiet suffering. In the weeks that followed, Amelia stepped into her new role with the same quiet dedication she had always carried, except now she walked through the halls of the manor a little taller, no longer invisible, no longer overlooked. Lily thrived in her new school, coming home each day with stories and excitement that made all those years of struggle feel finally worth it. And though Amelia never sought out attention or reward, life had a strange way of giving both to those who never demanded it in the first place. Kindness, it turns out, is rarely loud. It moves quietly, patiently, often unnoticed for a long time. But it is never forgotten, and more often than people expect, it finds its way back to those who never stopped offering it, even when the world gave them every reason to stop, and even when no one but the one watching from the top of the staircase ever truly saw it happen. If this story moved you, if you believe that patience and kindness always find their reward in the end, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Easy's Folktales. There are many more stories like this one still waiting to be told.